Oh man, this is just me or is it getting hot in here? But that's because we're traveling to the Begaritt continent. It is so yellow and like humid looking in the viewfinder. But we're in the Begaritt continent, or at least Rudius and Alina Lies will be traveling to the Begaritt continent very soon. And so, what better to just get yourselves get knowledgeable of the monsters and creatures found within the Begaritt continent. And so, let's go through the list of monsters from weakest to strongest, and just starting with the transport armadillo, or at least that's what it's called. We don't know the official name of the monster, but this is what Rudius calls it. And so, these are essentially just massive armadillos. Like, they are probably as tall as you are. That's their little humpback, whatever the armadillo back. It's probably like they probably stand about this tall because they are designed, I guess, to essentially what there was the little dragon mounts in the demon continent, the horses in the central Millis continent. These pull you along in carriages to travel you across the land. And so they are very docile creatures, and like they're almost like dogs in a way where they'll like metaphorically wag their tail. Do armadillos have tails? I don't know. But they are described to be very similar to dogs in their kind of behavior and everything. Although they're definitely, I don't know if they're like too agile and nimble, but they do get happy like a dog often. And so these are very weak because they're not really fighters. They may be like dogs, but they're still armadillos. And like, what are you going to do? Like, you're going to curl up in a ball. That's it, right? They're not aggressive creatures. And we'll find out more about this monster later, but griffins appear to be their natural enemy, and they kind of just cower at the sight of one. And so it might just be put into their DNA to be afraid of this creature, which makes sense. It's an eagle-lion hybrid, so they're kind of right on that. They live in the more eastern region of the Begaritt continent. There are three main regions, I guess four main regions that all these monsters live in. And I could tell you where the eastern part is. I could tell you where the northern part is. I could probably tell you where the desert part is. But there's another section, the Knots region. I don't know where the Knots region is. I'll be completely honest. It's not marked on the map, but I have an idea. But we'll get to that when we find a monster in that region. But these armadillos kind of live near the eastern region, which is where the labyrinth city of Rapon is, and that's kind of where Rudius is headed. And these things are like very well adapted to heat. They love heat, and they get cold very easily. And so when they do get cold, they will try and find any way to get warmth by perhaps snuggling under a blanket or something. But that's, they will they'll naturally try and find warmth, and they kind of always have to keep a very, I guess, a high temperature. And so yeah, the armadillo is likely just rank F, if that. It's not really a fighting monster, and it probably gets bullied a lot. So it's, be nice to him, be nice, okay? But the next monster up is more of an annoyance than anything else. We have the worst, the lowest tier is just, it's an armadillo. That's it. It's not going to hurt you. It's going to run away. What's slightly above that? An annoyance. And that's what this monster pretty much is. It's literally stated to be like, okay, these goddamn things, they don't do anything. They just get in the way, and they're just annoying. And that is the giant bat. They are rank F to E, and they're found all throughout the desert. And pretty much they're about 50 centimeters to a meter in size. And 50 centimeters is this big. And I assume this is like with wings expanded. And so I guess that's a big bat. But that's only half the size. Some of them can be this big as well. And so that is a pretty big bat, but also it's still a bat. What's it gonna do to you? It's gonna flap its wings a lot and annoy you. And that's quite literally all what they do. They just surround you. They don't even attack. They just surround you and annoy you with their like... That's it. Has anybody ever had a bat in their house before? I have. And it's really fun seeing the reactions of everybody else, because some of them are just like, okay, there's a bat in the house, that's interesting. And other people are like, oh my god, get it away, get it out of the house. Right? It's like, I'm just like, oh, it's a bat, that's so cute, they look adorable. Have you seen what a bat looks like? Like, I know there's a whole like, they look scary and whatever, they're creepy, whatever. Some bats are so cute. Have you seen a bat eat a banana? They're so adorable. I love them. But a giant bat? I don't know about that. I can't finish the rhyme, but I caught a rhyme. I don't have a transition. Gyro Raptor. They are rank. This is potentially. We don't have an actual official rank for these guys, but if I were to imagine, they're about rank E on their own, but they do live in packs, and so they're probably like they could range from C to maybe B, but that's stretching it, I think. They are essentially Gyroraptors are actual like dinosaurs that existed, and they're almost like a feathery velociraptor, but they aren't ever described to have feathers or fur or anything like that. They are just described to look like regular velociraptors, similar to those that are found in the demon continent, I believe. But with the name being Gyroraptor, it implies that there is some kind of fur on them. And so these things are very similar to hyenas in the sense of like they really just care about the food and nothing else. They're pretty cowardice, but they are, they're dangerous together. They'll definitely hunt all on their own, of course, but like if you beat up a few of the members in their pack, because their packs come in about, I believe, roughly a dozen, but pretty much if you knock out about half of them, they'll kind of just run away and like back off slowly. And if they're attacked by something that's absolutely massive or very scary, they'll just straight up run away. They're pretty cowardice creatures, and they kind of care more about their food than themselves and their companions. Again, kind of like hyenas. I don't know if that's actually true, but in my head, that's kind of what hyenas are. The next one is the gray tarantula, though, and we know almost nothing about these ones. They're just very secretive kind of spiders. They're called gray tarantula, which kind of, it implies that they're large. I imagine that they're like big or like double the size. They might be like 5 meters tall. This is what I'm picturing. We don't actually know yet, because the manga did skip the journey from the Begaritt continent, which I want to make a video called In Defense of the Manga, but it's hard to defend stuff like that, I'll be real. We'll probably see them in the anime a bit. These spiders do show up every now and then, but we really don't know anything about them. They are the first creature so far on this list to live in the Knots region. And I don't really know where the Knots region is. There is a certain patch of the Begaritt continent that's forest. It is a very weird region of the world. It's very like deserty, but also it has some badland sections, but also just some nice green, beautiful forests. It's such an odd place, and can a place like that exist? Isn't that kind of Egypt? Isn't that whole thing where like it used to look all nice and foresty with water and everything, and then something happened? I wonder if like the Begaritt continent is kind of in that transition, if that's possible, but I imagine that the Knots region is the more mountainous and spiky like badland area over near the water. So that's the only way that I could imagine it being. There's no other notable place of the Begaritt continent that the Knots region could be. And so that's just my prediction, I guess. Hypothesis. But it appears that these spiders kind of live and like go out at night rather than in the day. So it's, I don't know, C tier, because they're just a spider. They're not poisonous or anything. They kind of they would probably jump and like surprise attack you. But if you have a sword with you, you're just goodbye to your legs. If you're a magician, just like rock spike from the ground. Like they're pretty weak. So I would estimate that they're about C rank. But do you want to know what might be my favorite monster from the Begaritt continent? The Cactus Treant. And it's only my favorite because of the art that was produced, and it just looks so amazing. It's a little round bulb cactus that just I love it. It's really nice. They're C rank, officially C ranked, and they shoot needles at enemies, and they use basic earth magic. So they could probably use Quagmire, possibly. But then again, no, Quagmire does use water magic as well as earth. So they can't do that, but I guess they could still like shift the earth beneath them, beneath their enemy, knock them off and then just shoot them with... Other than that, I don't know. We don't really know anything about them. They're very weak. Again, they're only C tier. They know basic earth and just they shoot needles. That's it. But I love them. They try. But do you want to know what might also be my favorite? The C-ranked Succubus. There's a lot we know about the Succubus. Big surprise there, it's Mushoku Tensei. So these are very sexy, busty, blue-skinned women with like bat wings and I think horns. We see them in the manga, interestingly enough. We should see them very soon in the anime, so their design might change by the time this comes out. And so yeah, they got a little bit of bat characteristics to them, but overall they are just a very busty, blue-skinned woman. And so their combat strength is only E rank. So why are they C? Pretty much it's because of the pheromones that they release, which essentially any woman that like smells the pheromone will be completely turned off. They're like, oh, this is a disgusting smell. It's completely vile. But when a man smells it, that's when the fun begins. Pretty much, it kind of just, it makes the succubus look a lot more pretty, and it also just, we'll get to that in a sec, and it also just makes the guy feel a lot of things. It's a succubus, you know where it's going, and pretty much it's a very charming scent to men, which could cloud the men's judgment and put them into a uncontrollable lust. And they would then bring their victims back to their lair for consumption, leaving the remaining men with each other to fight to the death. Because charmed men will see other men as just enemies, because it's like, nah, this blue-skinned bat woman is mine, and so they'll just fight to the death pretty much. But what they can also do is control bats as well, and usually they'll do that when there is a party of men and women, and the bats will just surround the woman and to kind of like push them off to the side so they're distracted, so the succubus can just do their work with the men and kind of get them away. But it also just makes the man, I guess, in general, just makes the man want to do stuff, you know, with the succubus or just with any other woman. And so I wonder if Rudius and Alenalize are going to run into any of them. I don't know. What kind of wacky, you know, hijinks are they going to get into? Not much, actually. But the way to turn off this effect that they have is to use an intermediate or higher level detoxification magic. Or to just let it happen, pretty much. Once you do the deed, it'll kind of turn that brain off, and or I guess it will turn the brain back on, rather. You'll start listening with your upper brain rather than the lower one. But there's a few interesting key points about the succubus. These are native creatures to the demon continent, not the Begaritt continent. They they used to reside in the southwest region of the demon continent, but they're currently spread across the entire Begaritt continent due to Laplace deliberately mass producing and releasing them onto the continent to break the human defense there. This is way back in the Human-Demon War, the Laplace War, it's also known as, which I believe was, well, it would have been about 500 years ago, because we're in the year K4 20-something, 22, I think, give or take, and that's when the war ended, was 420-something years ago, and that's when we're in the King Dragon era, or whatever, which is like Perugius' reign, and so they reset the calendar, and so this would have happened about 500-ish years ago. But another interesting point is, I mentioned it earlier, but they aren't actually that pretty looking, these succubus. Pretty much it's because of the pheromones that it's possible that this is only a theory, that there's no like confirmation. They might be able to actually transform their face, or it might just be an illusion because of the pheromones, but they're very ugly looking. They are very bat looking. It is like a bat face, which again, I talked about how bats are cute, but big bats, I don't know about that. Again, that kind of sounded like a bit of a rhyme there. But once the pheromones are kicked off, or, you know, upon death, we don't really exactly know the conditions, you can see the true face, and it's not that pretty, unfortunately. But yeah, that's kind of it for Succubus. And so now moving on, kind of out of C rank, almost, we have the Sand Garuda, which is ranked C to A, which is a pretty, you know, it's a decently good jump. So Sand Garudas are pretty much just big chickens, big dinosaur chickens that are about 5 meters in size, and they prey on Gyro Raptors. We have a bit of a hierarchy here, and it doesn't end. We're going to find out what predator preys on the Sand Garudas in a little bit, but pretty much a single specimen is considered C rank. They're not overly strong. It's a big goddamn it's a big cock. But when they're in packs, which they do travel in packs, they are considered B to A rank. And so it kind of just depends on their size. I guess they come in many different shapes and sizes, or maybe they might be talking about the size of the pack. So it's, I don't know, they're just the big chickens. That's it. We don't really know anything else about them. On their own, they're pretty weak, but together, they strong. Chicken together strong. Chicken no kill chicken. I'm sorry, I recently watched Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and it's so good. It's so good. I had high hopes for it as well, and it just blew them out of the water. Moving on, we have the Begaritt buffalo. They're big big buffaloes that charge in packs. We know literally nothing else about them. I hypothesize that they are in the like B rank, I guess. I don't, it's a big buffalo, but they come in packs. So on their own, they're probably maybe C, but they're kind of, it's a buffalo. It's got to be strong, right? I don't know. I haven't been mentioning where they're from, but I bet you it doesn't matter. The past few, the tarantula, the trients, succubus, sand garuda, they all come from the desert region, which is kind of the central main area, or it might just mean everywhere. They're very common, but this Begaritt buffalo is specifically from the Nuts region, which again, I think would be the more Badlands area. Now we have another one from the desert region here, the twin death scorpion. These things are B rank, and for a decently good reason as well. It also has, you know, the name kind of implies, it has two twin tails. And so those two tails are both also very poisonous. And a single jab will make your skin, your head all purple and puffy, and it seems to completely debilitate you. We don't really know much of the effects of the poison, but it's able to do some serious damage to you, and it can only be healed by intermediate detoxification magic or higher. And so these scorpions, they're really not fast, they're not nimble, they can't really dodge any of your attacks. Despite being B, I think B ranked, it's either B or A ranked, I think depending on the translation. Monsters can start dodging your attacks. I want to say it's A, but if it is A, it makes sense why these things can't dodge your attacks. They're not too much of a threat. But again, if you get hit by it, you're going to get poisoned, but if you're a sword user, just dodge out of the way and go psh, goodbye to their tail. It's not really that much of a threat. Anything with long, limbly kind of arms and stuff, or just body parts, if you're a sword user, you just dodge it and just whoop, problem solved. But if you're a magician, it can be a little bit difficult because they have very tough skin. They're not nimble, so they're not going to dodge your attack, but they are pretty tough to beat and actually penetrate their skin. And they are quite large compared to the average monster. Like I said, if I said it, they're about 2 meters in length. They're almost as big as the room here. Can you even hear me? Anyway, pretty much that is a very big monster for the Begaritt continent. But there are definitely a few exceptions, but apparently they are some of the more bigger monsters in the Begaritt continent, which kind of puts into question how big the buffalo is. How big is this? The sand garudas are mentioned to be 5 meters tall. And so, I don't know, it's weird that it's saying that 2 meters is very large here, but I guess for the most part, a lot of these are kind of small. A trient's very small. The Gyro Raptors are probably that tall, I suppose. The giant bats are only about that big. They're not too giant, to be honest. The armadillo is definitely big. Succubus, they're big, but in different ways. I don't know, but there are definitely a few exceptions, though. But apparently, this is a pretty big monster. But now, let's talk about a bigger one. The T-Rex lizards, which we don't know much about them. We don't even know the name. This is just how they're described. If I were to assume B rank, give or take, and maybe A rank in packs, if they come in packs, I don't really know. I think they might. But these are giant lizards that look like T-Rexes that prey on sand garudas. So again, the chain continues. So you have the Gyro Raptors, which are that tall, probably. They're do we have an actual height on them? I don't think so. Gyro Raptors, we don't. But they're probably about that tall if they're a velociraptor. And then you have the 5 meter tall giant chicken of the sand garudas. They're massive. And then these T-Rex lizards, they prey on them. So they gotta be 10 feet tall or something. That's insane. And so I would assume that they're B to A rank, give or take. I don't think that they'd be enough to dodge your attacks or anything. They're just a T-Rex. And so on their own, definitely B, maybe A if they go in packs. But next up is something that we have already seen in the trailers, and that's pretty much it. The Griffin. And so everybody knows what a Griffin is. It's the body of a lion, head of an eagle, and it's got the wings. These things are pretty dangerous. They are B ranked individually, but they are A in a group, very much like with my personal ranking of the T-Rex lizards. And so their packs come in sizes of 2 to 5. Usually it can be higher, it can be lower. Well, not much lower than 2. Then that would just be an individual. These things are very territorial. Essentially, like there are little like factions and stuff of these things all around. And as you're traveling through, if you take out one of the factions, you should be like fine for the rest of the day. You won't find another one of these griffins for the rest of the day generally, just because they're very territorial. Once you take out one group, the other's like, whoa, hey, we don't want trouble. We don't want trouble. And so these things aren't able to use magic. Some of these monsters are, as we've already described with the trient, and that isn't definitely the only one. But despite not being able to use magic, they are they're physically powerful, and they are capable of very limited flight, just because they're a lion trying to fly. It's not going to work too well, but they are able to fly for a little bit. But because they have the body of a lion, they're able to go in the air. They are pretty nimble, they're agile, despite being a B rank monster, which again, I don't know if they're normally able to dodge attacks. These ones are able to. And they're they're very intelligent. They are very intelligent for what they are. For being a lion eagle monster, they will like coordinate attacks and ambush you and everything. They will set a trap for you. They're pretty intelligent despite all of that. And so as these are kind of difficult monsters to attack, even as a magician or as a swordsman, because as a swordsman, if they're in the air, you're gonna go, hey, get down here. Ugh. Like you're gonna jump and try to attack them. No, you're not. You're not gonna get to them unless you know the North God style attack of just taking your sword and throwing it. You're not gonna hit them. And that's where they could just swoop in. Maybe if they're in groups, right, they'll attack you from behind, from the front. They'll leave traps for you. They're pretty dangerous. And as a magician, it's kind of hard to attack them because they're very nimble and agile. They'll just dodge out of the way. And so if you would find them in a group, it is pretty dangerous. And a bit of a side note here, Rudius has learned how to cook a lot better throughout the years. And pretty much he's cooked a few of these monsters that we've already talked about. The Gyro Raptors, for example. But according to him, they just weren't really good tasting. No matter what he did to them, they just weren't high quality meat, which kind of makes sense. The Gyro Raptors, I don't imagine they would have a lot of fat on them and just be very muscly, and that's it. And the fat is what it gives a lot of like flavor to meat. But because this monster, the Griffin, is like part bird, part lion, it's got a lot of fat on it with being a lion and everything, right? A lot of muscle as well. With it being a bird, it's like, chicken tastes good. Lion probably tastes good. I don't know. Together, it is actually a pretty tasty meal, except there is an odd flavor to it, but Rudius is able to mask that with spices, and specifically, he uses 1 part ground kokuri nuts and 2 parts awazu seeds and abi leaves for a spicy tasting seasoning. He rubbed that into the meat with a little bit of salt, and again, the slightly little odd flavor from the Griffin itself. Otherwise, it tasted really well, although I believe he said that it was undercooked. And he's like, just rub in more of that spice and then it's good to go. That's not... Cook your meat fully, kids. And adults, everyone. Don't do what Rudius says, for a lot of different reasons, but don't do what he says when it comes to the meat. Make sure it's at like that 165 temperature Fahrenheit. Make sure it's out of the danger zone. You gotta be safe, okay? Be safe with your meat, all right? That, in a lot of different ways, be safe. But next up, we have a monster that at first I thought was a lot bigger of a threat, quite literally bigger than I thought, and that is the Sandworm. At first, I was going to rank these things from like anywhere from C rank all the way to S rank, but I see it's probably C to B at most. I don't think that these are extremely overly powerful monsters, but the reason why they're a B, I could not give them an A just because they're not that big. Unfortunately, so sandworms, how they attack is they lie underground. These worms, by the way, are 5 to 10 meters long and about a meter in diameter, pulling out the trusty, what are you called again? Measuring tape. You can see a meter is roughly this big. So their mouth is like that big. And so it is enough to swallow a person whole for sure. And again, they are 10 meters deep, and so they'll just digest you. Pretty scary, right? In the real world, sure. But also, that's not that big. I would imagine that they're like big, like just a giant mouth. Like their mouth would be the size of the room. Because what they do is they wait and lie underground, and they essentially, when you walk over there, basically to mine, they'll just come up and eat you. Pretty scary. But also, it's very small. It's just step out of the way. And especially because if you learn to spot the signs, and there are signs, you can just know where they're going to be, shoot something in the ground, and then they're dead. Or just use a sword and just slash the ground where they are, and then it'll just die. And even if you do, like, they manage to come up and you dodge the attack, there you go. You cut a worm in half. It's not really that bad. And so, yeah, once they get their first attack in, it's like, okay, well, their element of surprise is gone. Because, again, they could swallow you whole. It's very dangerous to get absorbed. It's vored, I guess. It's very dangerous to get vored, but we don't actually know too much of what happens. There's not like a buzzsaw inside. There's not a bunch of teeth that kind of just crunch you up. It seems like that if you get just eaten, you'll slowly be digested, kind of like a regular snake, I guess. They don't instantly kill you and like just crunch you to death inside of them. It's just, you slowly get digested. And so if you have a sword, or if you know any kind of magic, you can just pop out. No problem, really. They're not overly strong. These are the only monsters that I'm really like downplaying, other than the bats, those stupid bats. Because this thing I had a lot of expectations for it, and it's whatever. And so some are very small. Like, remember, again, you got the 1 meter long ones or wide ones, but then some are only as wide as Alina Liza's waist. So like, maybe that big, that's not really that strong. That could, if they like attack you and then latch onto your arm, sure, your arm's gone, but like, I don't care. But there are similar monsters in the Great Forest as well, but they're only about 20 to 30 centimeters thick, and they can kind of bite your leg off at most, so it's not too big of a deal. And there are other monsters similar in the Demon Continent, but we don't know anything about them, but I can only assume they're much bigger than anything in the Begaritt Continent. These are like, the Demon Continent sandworms would be the ones that I'm imagining. They'd probably be anywhere from C to A or even S tier, right? They would just be these massive behemoths that would just swallow an entire party whole. That's how I'm picturing them. That's how I wanted them to be, but they're just a big disappointment. And before we move on to the next one, into the A-ranked ones, pretty much the way to spot a sandworm before it attacks is essentially there's a thin donut-shaped ridge in the ground where they're located, and so as long as you can search the terrain for that ridge, you can identify their hiding spots instantly. But the desert itself isn't flat, and so there may just be natural ridges to begin with, and especially if it's on a hill or if there's some rocks nearby, you may misidentify and accidentally get the jump on, right? It may attack you. Even if you think it's that, it might not be, and you might not notice it. Point is, if you are a very experienced adventurer who knows the desert well, you'll be able to spot it. But otherwise, you will probably get jumped by these things. And that is where, like, unless you know a good sword style, unless you know good magic, they will be dangerous. And so I don't want to downplay them, but also I was so disappointed by them. I know size doesn't matter, but in this case it does, okay? But moving on to something that isn't a disappointment, the Windmaster Eagles. These are, we don't really know the actual ranking of them. I would estimate B to A rank, simply because these things use some pretty cool wind magic. And we don't really know anything else about them, but I like them. It's essentially a Corviknight that can use wind attacks, air attack. I know Pokemon. It's just a Corviknight. That's all they are. That's awesome. I love Corviknight. And so they're located in the Knots region, but that's kind of all that we know about them. And so I really like them. They're cool. But there's nothing we know about them. And so moving on to the Sea Dragon, the official first A-ranked monster. We're getting to the strong ones, the really cool and kind of stupid ones as well. But we're getting to the strong ones. And this Sea Dragon we've already known about before, way back in season 1, actually. Probably like episode 6, maybe 5, because The sea dragons are found in the northern region of the Begaritt continent, kind of in between the central continent and Begaritt continent within the sea. And so these are aquatic dragon type monsters, and these are monsters that are harvested because of their magic stones. And so, if you remember, Aquahardia has a water magic stone in the center of it, and that came from a sea dragon. And the person who made this staff, just to remind you, is Chien Procreon, who was known as the greatest staff craftsman of all time and the rod director in the Asuran Royal Palace's Mage Guard. That's a cool ass title. But yeah, we don't actually see any of these in the story. This is like, I guess, old information. We knew about this back in Volume 2, but still, it's cool. Aquahardia, we're finally in the home of the sea dragon. And now we have what is possibly one of the most stupid. We're in the top 3 now. We only have 3 left. This one is stupid because this is an E to S rank monster. How? Pretty much, it's an ant. And these are originally, okay, so based on how I imagine it, these originally were just regular ants. Regular army ants, fire ants. Is army ant an actual thing? I think that they were regular fire ants. But then they mutated over time, and we'll get into that eventually when we talk about the number 1 monster here in the area. But they, I believe, started out as just regular ants and mutated over time and over generations and years, which probably was very quick considering ant lives are very short. And then they became up to 30 centimeters to a meter in size. And so that's not too bad. Again, that's 30 centimeters on the low end, which is here, all the way up to here. So imagine an ant that big. And can an ant like carry 100 times its body weight or something? So these things can just like fold you, essentially. You are not winning that arm wrestling competition with this ant. But there is quite a bit that we know about these guys. And so they march in a bit of like a formation like army ants. Army ants, they might be a real thing. And so they also come in very, very drastically different shapes and sizes. And so some have wings, some don't. Some have like human-looking lower bodies. And the queen, let's pull it out again, is about, we're still going, 2 meters tall or long. We're back to the 2 meters. They are pretty big, and they have the upper body of a beautiful woman. I want to meet that queen. And so, yeah, we have some of the ants have lower human bodies. She has an upper human body, almost like a centaur, an ant-tar, I guess. And then some have wings, some don't. They kind of come in all different shapes and sizes, depending on the mutation, I guess. And again, we'll get into that eventually. Some probably have elephant legs, now that I think about it. Again, we'll get into that. But these, despite being just regular ants, are some of the most dangerous monsters that you can run into in the desert. Because unlike other ants, they don't establish like static colonies, and they kind of move all across the desert. They move in constant motion, eating absolutely everything in their path. And so these things did, in the past, have natural enemies and predators, but they kind of just said, nah, I'd win. And they meant it, just because of their sheer number, right? Them on their own, E rank. Pathetic. But them as a group, very powerful. So smaller ants, they are E ranked, but then you have the larger ones individually are D to C, but a group of thousands is a threat in the high S range. High S. These things could kill a dragon. Okay, they probably can't, because the dragon could just go whoosh, fly up in the air, and then just go inline, just burn all of them, and they're dead. They probably wouldn't match too well against them. But almost any other monster in the that I've listed so far, yeah, they could probably beat. And so the way that they kind of live their lives is they kind of just travel around the desert. They'll make a few pit stops along the way where they just eat and breed to replenish their numbers for the next generation. Because again, ants, they live kind of short lives, I guess, and so they probably die off pretty fast, but they replenish just as fast. And so very dangerous monsters despite being ants. What? But now we have the next monster, which we actually only find out about way later on in the story, and that is the yellow naga. They live somewhere in the deserts, pretty much underground and within caves. And these things are very scary, and we don't actually know the official ranking of them, but I would say that they are A to S rank, possibly even being just the strongest monster in this area. I don't know about beating the ants. The ants are very strong, right? It's a bit of a tie-up between these top three. I don't know who would really win in a battle royale fight, just because the ants power in numbers, right? But this yellow naga is kind of designed for combat. They are very giant dragon-like monsters, about 100 meters in length, and they live underground, and they kind of swim in the sand as though it's water. That is how much they've adapted to the sand and to the desert, is they're just swimming around in the water, and that's it. And so they'll kind of be around caves and just underground, and they prey on sandworms, which again, it's like, I thought, man, that's a big feat. It's really not. But there appear to be many different kinds of dragons in the Begaritt continent, but this is kind of one of the only ones that we know about. The sea dragon obviously is one of them. A sandworm might be considered a dragon. I don't know. But other than that, we don't really know much. Maybe the Gyro Raptors are technically dragons. Sand garudas, maybe the T-Rexes, but they might be some form of dragon-esque monster, but not really. And so this is only one of two different dragons that we know about, and neither of them have wings, I believe. So the sea dragon is something that just lives underwater, right? We don't really know. It's not going to fly. And the yellow nagas generally, they don't have wings, do they? I don't think so. They're apparently, yellow nagas apparently more so resemble a worm rather than a dragon. That's YRM, not worm as in a worm. It's a worm, not a worm. You know, you can hear it, right? And so I don't know if these things actually have wings or not, but they are just very long snake-like creatures that kind of just all underwater. But now we have the only confirmed, other than the ants, S rank monster, the Behemoth. That is all that they are known as. And these are colossal monsters that range between, on the small end, 100 meters, which again, as we've discussed, that's the yellow naga's average size, all the way up to 1,000 meters. This goes up to 8 meters. I would just throw this away, but I don't want it to break. But we're not going to need the tape measure anymore. 1,000 meters. That makes the naga look microscopic. Well, that makes the humans look microscopic pretty much. The yellow naga is still, it's like that size. And so pretty much, what is a behemoth? It's a big old whale with elephant legs. Remember when I talked about the ants? Maybe some of them had elephant legs? We're going to get into that. Pretty much, these are very docile creatures. They don't really want to start a fight, although we do know of one that did, and we see where it ended up, unfortunately. But these are just massive giant creatures that kind of just walk along, and they kind of just mind their own business. They probably get attacked daily. They step on a bunch of sandworm traps, and then it's they're like, I stepped on a Lego, right? That's the idea that they probably have. But because they're just so big and massive, you can't hurt them, right? There's nothing that you can really do. And so unless they do get attacked, though, they'll be like, screw off. I'm minding my own business here. They will attack. But otherwise, they're like, yeah, I'm minding my own business, right? The two different ways of saying that same sentence, right? And it all depends on what you do. If you want to piss it off, go for it. But otherwise, just let it be. They're nice, happy little creatures. Happy big creatures. And you want to know what makes them even more scary? They'll just dig underground when they're threatened, and they'll just... and you can't see them anymore. You don't know where they are. You want to know what's also scary about these? Almost no corpses have ever been found. Only one that we know of have been found. And that is a corpse, a giant skeletal structure surrounding the labyrinth city of Rapon. It is bigger than a city. A massive city. And these bones in specific, so pretty much when a monster eats the corpse of a stronger monster, it will mutate and get stronger themselves. And so the story goes, I guess, the regular ants ate the remains of this behemoth and then got a lot stronger. And they mutated to become monster ants. And then they mutate again and again and again just to get stronger and stronger. And so those mutant ants dug countless different nests, and all of those nests had turned into labyrinths. And so that's why it's the labyrinth city of Rapon, because there are just an abundant amount of labyrinths all throughout the area. And that is thanks to the ants. The hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of ants going all around, digging, creating nests all throughout this area, and as well as probably just the rest of the Begaritt continent. This is just a playground for dungeon divers. If you want to be a dungeon diver, you want to make money, you go here, because there are more labyrinths being created on probably a weekly basis, knowing the numbers, right? And also a little bit more information. It said that the maze city of Rapon was built inside of the rib cage of an especially large behemoth. So it is a bit bigger than normal, probably maybe 2,000 meters, 1,500, but it was on a rampage. For whatever reason, this specific behemoth was angry, and it was just going on a rampage, attacking everything, but somehow it died. And you want to know who was strong enough to kill the behemoth of behemoths? Kalman II. And so Kalman II was the second generation North god, and he was among the 7 great powers at just number 7. And so technically he was the weakest of the 7 great powers, but as Ruijerd has stated, back in the day, the 7 great powers were far stronger than any of the 7 great powers today, right? So the current 7, I guess, can I say it's Galfarion? Galfarion is the current sword god, and he is really strong, absolutely, very strong. But against Kalman II, back in his prime, probably fodder. Let's be real. Not strong at all, just in comparison. And so the weakest of the 7 great powers, and remember, Orsted is still he is one of the 7 great powers. He's kind of up at the top, pretty much. He's the single strongest man alive. And he is one of the, he is from the original 7 great powers, I think, and so he's kind of just lived along here. And so the gap between Orsted and anyone below him is absolutely massive, just to give more power to Orsted, just to show you his strength. And so there's a lot that makes this monster, the behemoth, famous, right? You have the story of Kalman II killing it. You have the mystery, where do the corpses go? People think that there is a hidden behemoth burial ground somewhere within the Begaritt continent. We don't know where, but people think that, right? There's a mystery about that. A behemoth of behemoths is surrounding the maze city of Rapon, and I don't know how many I've actually listed. I don't think I've been counting properly, but there's a lot to these monsters, and there's a lot of legends to them, and there's just a lot of history and lore about them. And so they are very famous monsters, and they're very strong. Maybe one of the strongest monsters just in the entire world, but the only thing that could really top a behemoth is probably something in the divine continent or the demon continent, which is, I realize now, that is a nice opposite balance there. And that is the last of all of the monsters within the Begaritt continent. What do you think about the monsters here? What is your favorite? For me, it might just have to be the Cactus trients. I love it. They're adorable. The Succubus are obviously amazing. I hate the Sandworms, but I also really love the yellow naga. They are just awesome. And behemoths, they're just chill. They're awesome. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, give it a like and subscribe for more Mushoku Tensei content, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.